This land is mine. God gave this land.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Nikki, Aurora, and from me. Oh, aren't my girls just beautiful? Well, I am going to plunge in because today we have a lot of ground to cover, and it's pretty much not all of it, because some of it is entertaining and trivial, but most of it is going to be pretty serious. So without further ado, I am going to plunge right in with what Words Bloom has to say. Anyone who believes Virginia took her own life also believes that the naked young man climbing down a bedsheet out of a palace window was an actor in a movie that was filmed at the palace, even though there was no camera crew there and no such movie exists. I am returning to this subject because I have been given information from members of British jury, which is very important, and I want to share it with you. I have also been in touch with people in the Middle East and people in the United States of America, because in case some of you might have forgotten, I have a foot in each camp. So, without further ado, I'm going to plunge in again with what Wendy Boardman says. Lady C, isn't the threatened support of Ukraine coming via Starmer, not our King and Prince William? Is he putting our monarchy in danger, and Starmer does not care for our monarchy? I keep seeing all roads leading back to worldly control from Israel. Am I misreading the situation? I love listening to your worldly views and historical stories. Your views are articulated brilliantly in such a considered way. You also are with Mickey and Aurora and occasionally your sons very easy on the eye. I am loving it. God bless and take care. Believe it or not, the two situations are linked. And I'm going to start out by saying that this is a rather perceptive comment from Wendy Boardman. And we need to remember that the first duty of a government and the first duty of the leaders of a nation should be the protection of that nation's interests. The nation that protects its perceived interests the most rigorously is Israel. Basically, we in the United Kingdom and Europe, and to an extent in the United States, could actually take a leaf out of Israel's book and learn that the duty of a country is primarily to its citizens, not to its allies. There's such a thing as realpolitik. It used to be, when people were properly educated, a readily accepted fact of life. Of course, nowadays, people are not properly educated. A classical education has gone out of the window and been replaced by all sorts of fashionable theories that actually divorce us from the lessons of history and have endangered our civilization because we are no longer aware of the dangers to which we are being subjected by our ignorant leaders. So let's put it in its correct context. And now I'm going to answer the question, or I should say the two questions. I have been informed that Virginia Giuffre I need to be careful how I put this, that Virginia Giuffre was in fact bumped off in a de facto way. But I'm going to get to that a bit later because I have taken extensive notes and I am basically going to read from my notes so that the thoughts that were presented to me are conveyed as accurately as possible without my having to remember them. First of all, there is the business of deflection, which is hugely at play here. We do not seem to understand in our culture that allies are not friends. And when allies' interests diverge, when their national interests diverge, they can and often do conflict with the interests of their allies. And it is the duty of each leader to protect his or her country's interests first and foremost. I have to tell you, the conversations I've been having over this show me that it really does in life suit one to be courageous. Because I have stood up for what I believed was correct, I have received unexpected rewards. I have received approaches from people who it would surprise you to think would be approaching me. Except, again, we come down to the fact that what is going on at the moment is so momentous, with each of the allies involved having conflicting interests. And that is within their own countries and in relation to others, that we are living in very conflicting times. And people and groups who you would imagine are invariably going to be supportive of each other are not. And that they, on the one hand, move with each other, and on the other hand, they move sometimes against each other. Now, this has been very visible to people who want to open their eyes and see in the last few days. First of all, there was the vote in the Knesset to annex the West Bank. This is an absolute slap in the face to Donald Trump and the peace initiative. We also have King Charles III receiving Volodymyr Zelensky at Windsor Castle, staging a ceremonial welcome ahead of a political summit yesterday. The coalition of the willing, with Keir Starmer being involved in it, as well as the other European leaders who are encouraging Zelensky to not accept the American peace deal. Do you begin to see how entirely complex the world situation is at the moment? Who is allied with whom, and who is presenting whose interests to the detriment of his or her ally? Consider all of that. And now you begin to realize how, what has gone on recently in terms of the Prince Andrew situation is not exactly a natural evolution. I'm going to refer to my notes. Some members of Israeli Jewry, as well as some British Jewry, are outraged at some of the things the Israeli governments and its agents have been doing and customarily do. Not all Jews are pro-Netanyahu, nor are all Israeli. And not all Arabs are anti-Israeli. This is the feedback that I have got from the people I've been speaking to. There's also the fact that secular Arabs have different interests from theocratic Arabs. There are also tribal elements that are coming into play in this whole scenario. There are class divisions, class prejudices, and class preferences that cut across national and religious borders. So you will find two people that the average person in the West would think were diametrically opposed to each other, whose interests actually coincide totally and are in accord with each other, while people who in the West we might think have coincidental interests, or coinciding interests would be a better way of putting it, actually have interests that are clashing. There is no doubt, according to what I have been told by my Jewish and Israeli connections, that Mossad's fingerprints are all over the Prince Andrew business. And I'm going to quote, it's brilliant. They're brilliant. They killed Virginia Giuffre, but we'll get to that after I tell you why they set the whole thing up. There's no better dark arts organization in existence than Mossad, obviously. They set the situation up knowing that Virginia Giuffre's book was coming out and that Ehud Barak, who was the former Prime Minister of Israel, would be accused by her of, since this is YouTube, I'll use the word ravishment. They needed a story that would deflect attention away from Ehud Barak, and they've achieved their objective. Everyone everywhere is talking about the Prince Andrew business, and no one is talking about Virginia's accusations of far more serious crimes which Barak committed, according to her, against her. It has to be said, and this is later in the interview, but I'm going to pop it in now, because it has to be said that Mossad and the other agencies in Israel are very aware of the fact that there is tremendous anti-Israeli feeling and that it is spilling over into anti-Jewish feeling. And Jews all over the world are feeling the heat as a result of this. There are British Jews who say that they do not feel safe in Britain anymore. And to those of you who are pro-Palestinian, I am not being anti-Palestinian when I make the points I'm making. The points I'm making are indisputable facts as a result of the conflict that exists and has existed in various shapes and forms for 77 years, but have immediate consequences at the moment, contemporaneously. They needed a story that would deflect attention away from Ehud Barak, because they were seriously concerned that Virginia's accusations against Barak would create a groundswell of anti-Semitic hostility worldwide. When they've achieved their objective, Mossad are very aware that Britain has become, for them, too pro-Palestinian. In their way of thinking, the idea of an Israeli prime minister being in the frame, named in her book, accused of the crime of ravishment, and the focus of worldwide media attention was something to avoid at all costs. So they set up the whole situation whereby they pull the trigger on Prince Andrew just before the release of the book. And that would divert attention that would otherwise obviously be vested in her claims against Ehud Barak. And everybody would be preoccupied with the diversion, which is precisely what has happened. Mossad did it by getting compromising information about Andrew and Fergie out through leaked emails to Daphne Barak. Now, Daphne Barak is an American-Israeli, very well-established and well-known pro-Israel journalist with very good connections in Israel, and she is a safe pair of hands, and she has proven to be a safe pair of hands. She also went to Associated Newspapers because they have an issue with that it was going to help to resolve by having the story put out through them. I'm told they, meaning Mossad, knew the British press would go hell for leather against Andrew and the royal family, which is precisely what's been happening. Everyone, the British press, the royal family, the public, are all performing true to the playbook of how Mossad shrewdly assessed they'd perform. Mossad is the most sophisticated organization of its kind on earth. I'd also say the most effective. They didn't say that, I'm saying that. They've got experts with superb psychological skills who can and do accurately predict how people will perform. Mossad knows the way no other organization knows how people will act and react. That's one of the reasons, one of the main reasons they're so successful. The other reason is they have tentacles spreading everywhere. They've got dyed-in-the-wool supporters in the UK and US establishments, political as well as other. Professional, media, you name it. All elements of the British and the US establishment have infiltrators who have a connection to Mossad, including the late Robert Maxwell. But that's something else. Well, I don't want to get bogged down with that now. They have these supporters, not only in Whitehall and all the UK political parties, but also the US in both political parties. They are well represented in the deep state. It is actually said that they are better represented within deep state level than any other organization on earth, including the political parties in the countries that they are, shall we say, comfortable in. It's no accident that the leaks are through Daphne Barak. Let's remember who she is and how well connected she is in both Israel and the US. Let's not forget that Robert Maxwell was a leading Mossad operative, and his daughter Gillian is involved in all of this as well. Robert Maxwell, used the Mirror pension fund not to prop up his companies, as some people believe, but to further the interests of the state, which was his ultimate loyalty, namely the Israeli state. That's why he is buried where he's buried. Don't for a second believe that they weren't aware that Virginia intended to point the finger at Ehud Barak. They knew, and she knew they knew. She thought she'd be able to get away with it by fingering him, not by name, but just by naming his position. There's little doubt that they reached her. They killed her. Some people are saying that she was wiped out by them. She was, but she wasn't. This is really interesting, actually. Plausible deniability. Where is my place now? I'm sorry, I've lost my place. Plausible deniability is the order of the day here. The Israelis have known for some time that they had to head the cattle off at the pass just before her book came out. They couldn't stop the book coming out, nor could they influence its contents, but they could try to divert attention away from its real main accusation, which is that one of their former prime ministers ravished her. I'm using that word instead of the shorter one, the one with 4 letters. So, Mossad's solution has been 1. Setting up the Andrew and Sarah scandal with the objective of engulfing the royal family in a media storm, which they've succeeded in doing. Getting the British press distracted by accusations against Andrew, and getting the British government, which is perceived as being pro-Palestinian, neutralized as a result by having to deal with the fallout from the Andrew business instead of being a thorn in the side of the Israeli government at this most delicate time. Because it is a delicate time for Israeli objectives. And these do not always accord with American objectives. America, I'll get to that in a while because it's down here somewhere. 2. What no one seems to understand is that Israel and the US do not inevitably and do not always share the same objectives or have the same interests. Bibi and the Israelis are far better tacticians than the Americans. They've understood all along that there would be times when their interests and objectives would diverge from the Americans, and they'd need to be in a position to take advantage of the situation so that Israel's interests would be preserved at the expense of the Americans. That is what's happening right now, and it is actually. 3. Trump is being neutralized, and Bibi is being empowered at Trump's expense. Bibi knows that Trump wants the kudos of being the great peacemaker, but Bibi doesn't want peace quite as much as Trump. He has complicating factors, which means that only a peace that gives him greater Israel will afford him the ultimate protection he needs personally. His objective could well be construed as being somewhat unrealistic. Though he does have allies in the US and Arab camps who are secularists and don't want a Palestinian state headed up by rabid anti-Westerners or theocrats. So, no Hamas, no mullahs. I'm saying that. Bibi's aware that his personal needs can be spun so that they appear to coincide with Israel's existential needs. You know, Israel's long-term security, its distrust of the Arab world, its demands for a peace deal that guarantees its right to exist in such a way that it makes a treaty with the other side virtually impossible, effectively playing upon the fears of the Jewish lobby in the diaspora, so that there's no agreed peace, which of course has the positive effect of keeping the hawks in Washington happy and the war machine worrying. He's also aware that A, he needs to keep out of prison, very important that, and B, any solution needs to assure him of the certainty that he will enjoy the lifelong kudos he needs to remain a free man, a valuable politician, and a political figure who is so revered that his political enemies and the judiciary will ignore all charges against him or wish them away. He intends evidently to be the new Ben-Gurion. I actually think a more accurate way of putting it would be that he intends to be the reincarnation of Queen Marie of Romania, who at the end of the First World War got herself to the Versailles Peace Conference and increased the size of her husband's country significantly as she, shall we say, nobbled all of the other statesmen. 4. The leaks about Andrew and Fergie have been deliberate. They have been intended to destroy their reputation and create a scandal that would be so huge that it would deflect attention away from Barak and Israel at a time when Israel needs what they perceive as the anti-Israeli, pro-Palestinian Brits distracted away from the Hamas support and negotiations. Mossad will be laughing up its sleeve at the naivety of the Brits. Their the British are totally distracted away from what's happening in the Middle East, and indeed also in Ukraine, as they and their parliamentarians and press demand the scalps of Andrew and Fergie, and incidentally destabilize the existing political system in this country. Now, they didn't say this, but I'm going to say it. To the benefit of the anti-monarchists in this country, who include the present British Prime Minister and the British ruling party. Then you have, conservative politicians, idiots, jumping into the fray, demanding that this happen and that happen, and creating and compounding the diversion. Absolute insanity. And to prevent this from being too long, I am going to break off now and continue this tomorrow, because it's going to be too long otherwise. And this is a really important ground to cover. And tomorrow I will explain what I have been told by people in the know as to how Virginia Giuffre came to meet her end. But if I go on much longer, it's going to just be impossible. And this is, after all, not an epistle to the Ephesians. It is hopefully entertainment with some edifying aspects. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. Please let me have feedback in the comment section. And thank you so much. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and please also hype. It evidently makes a difference. Thank you so much. Godspeed, and I hope to see you tomorrow with the second part of this. Godspeed. Bye-bye.